Welcome to Herbally Yours, an adventure into the world of natural medicine. Here is your host, Dr. Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse who will help you take the leap to ultimate wellness.
And greetings. Thank you so much for joining me, Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse, for another edition of Herbally Yours, right here on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. Herbally Yours brings you the latest information about the many facets in the world of natural living. Today, I am so happy to have on board as our guest, Sheree Clark, who is a Midlife Courage Coach. She is a TV show host, an inspiring speaker, and an accomplished author. Sheree has written and presented on topics ranging from finding your passion to overcoming career burnout. She appears in a weekly segment on KCWI Channel 23 called Fork in the Road with Sheree Clark, while maintaining a busy practice coaching clients one-to-one and in groups on creating an authentically fulfilling life. Sheree offers a personal course called What the Fork Are You Waiting For? 3 Secrets for a Happier, Healthier Life. Real-life strategies for helping to ensure success by setting goals along with good nutritional choices. And to find her on her website, it's What the Fork Are You Waiting For? All spelled out, What the Fork Are You Waiting For? .com. And thank you so much for joining us today, Sheree.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Let's go back in time just briefly. How did you become the Midlife Courage Coach?
That's a great question. Well, like many of your listeners, I have had varying incarnations of life, and I have a master's degree in counseling and higher education, and I did that as a career. And I really loved it until I didn't, and it was time for me to do something else, and that something else ended up, I owned an advertising agency for 25 years, which I loved until I didn't. And then in 2009, I decided that I was really at a fork in the road in my journey, and I needed to do something else. And so I branched out. I had gotten some certifications and gotten more schooling in coaching and in nutrition and some various things. And I hung out my shingle, and I started as a holistic health coach. And from there, I morphed into Midlife Courage Coach. And the reason for that was that I discovered that we can talk about nutrition and we can talk about our choices until we're blue in the face. Most people know that it's a better idea to eat broccoli than to eat chips. But we eat for a variety of reasons, and many of them don't have to do with nutrition. They have to do with things that are going on in our life, and I wanted to address that.
And it sounds like you created an excellent platform to be able to do that. So, that's really helpful both for yourself and the people you work with. Now, I want to tell our listeners that I connected with you because you got in touch with me because of a wonderful webinar series that you put together called Magnificent Midlife Women. And there's many people on there, including myself. And if people want to find out more about that, you can just go to my website, naturalnurse.com. Under calendar, you'll see a link to that Magnificent Midlife Woman. But what was your concept about the series, and what are some of the topics that you are breaching in that series?
Well, the reason for the series was that I and so many of my friends, we talk about this point in our life that we call midlife, and I'm 62, and midlife, the definition of it's moved and morphed as a term really even since my mom was my age, and the way that we live our midlife years and the things that we expect for ourselves and out of our lives has shifted, and I wanted to address that, review it, examine it, and kind of out it. So predictably, some of the things that we'll talk about on that series, and we do talk about on that series, are things like menopause and menopausal symptoms, and we talk about weight and how you gaining weight and weight redistribution is a thing that some of us deal with and so forth. So there's some common, things that you would predict and expect, but we also address things that impact our health which might not be top of mind. Things like divorce, and divorce tends to become common once the kids are out of the house. The role of the midlife woman in caring for aging parents, the changes that happen in our finances, the dealing with issues of sexual intimacy, all of the things that we thought we had a handle on, we thought was going to be the same way our entire lives, and it turns out it's not that way. As we age, we need to change. And so that's what we address in the series.
And that I've seen, because I've been getting the little emails about the daily topics, they really look interesting too. And I did notice you're talking about alcoholism. Like, at what point does having that drink every day for relaxation turn into something more worrisome?
Yeah, and that's been an extremely popular topic, because it's one, we're social animals, and so you have a glass of wine, you don't think about it, but then when you look at your calendar and can't remember when you didn't have one, then it might be time to step back and say, now, what role is this serving in my life? What purpose? And am I happy with it? And what I like about the examination that we do of that and other topics is it's judgment-free. It's really just meant to crack the door open and say, this is your vision and your life. What do you think about where you're at?
Well, I want you to know that you are listening to Herbally Yours at the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse, and my guest is Sheree Clark, Midlife Courage Coach, and you can find her at whattheforkareyouvaitingfor.com. And thank you so much for that great information. Now, really, the name of your company, how did you come up with that? The Fork in the Road.
Fork in the Road. Well, I mentioned that when I started on this journey, when I was leaving the advertising world, I was doing really more health coaching. I dealt with food primarily and nutrition. And so Fork in the Road seems like such a clever, little play on words. Well, as my business morphed, it was appropriate, because when we're at midlife, when we're at any decision-making point as humans, we're at a fork in the road. And what I particularly like about the name, and I'm glad that you identified that, because it really does fit. People think about the forks in the road that they face during life, and they think typically of big things. Do I take this job opportunity and move halfway across the country, or do I downsize from my 4-bedroom home and move into a condo because the kids are gone? Do I get a divorce or stay married in a loveless marriage? All of those things, those decisions are certainly forks in the road. But what my philosophy is that our lives are made up of the daily little forks in the road, not the big ones. The big ones come, sometimes once in a lifetime. But every day you have the opportunity to decide, am I going to have that glass of wine this evening? Am I going to say yes to dessert for the 5th night in a row? Am I going to go to yoga this morning or hit the snooze? Those decisions, when we take them in their sum total, are the things that accumulate to tell us whether or not we're going to have a quality life or not.
That's really interesting that you picked that name, because it's certainly catchy, that's for sure. And, you can really relate to some of these issues that people need help with. And so can I. I would say I haven't found it challenging, I have to say, because for some reason I just embrace every kind of phase in life, and I'm finding, because I'm quite a bit older than you, that it's the most exciting and most liberating time of life, because I have less to prove.
Absolutely. I so agree with you on that point, Ellen. And the other thing is that I also have a kind of a perspective of the scale of things. Something that seemed like such a big crisis in your 30s, 40s, even 50s. Taken in sum total, I can step back and go, okay, nobody died, and I'm a long way from living under a bridge, and so this too shall pass. This is part of my lesson, part of my journey.
So isn't that wonderful that it doesn't have to be that, I guess if you're very attached to a certain way that you look, then it's very challenging, because how your look is going to change. Of course, that's why some people dye their hair and get plastic surgery, and all that is fine if they need that, but you're still not going to look like you did when you were 25.
And nobody does. Nobody escapes it, and nobody's getting out of here alive. So I think you're right. And it's interesting because for me, the transition times, the times that have been, I guess I would say, quote unquote, difficult, would be when the change first becomes perceptible to me. For example, if listeners were interested in the series that you mentioned, Magnificent Midlife Woman, in the video that I do to introduce that, I say, when did I get bat wings? And I say it half in jest, but the reality is my muscle tone isn't what it was when I was 20. And it would be ridiculous to think that it would be. And the times that it was difficult to make that adjustment were when I first made the discovery. When that first time you look in the mirror and say, wow, where did that come from? Or I don't remember that being there. And having to embrace or make the adjustment, the mental mindset change, is the only challenge to me. Once I can embrace it and say, you know what? Here's the good news. I'm still breathing. I'm still flexible. I can still do things in yoga that some people 40 years younger than me can't do. And yeah, my arms and my kneecaps don't look quite as sexy as they did at one point. Oh well, I'm smarter.
Well, and also, if you're talking about dating and you're talking about men, unless you like robbing the cradle, the guys, that are age appropriate, if that's something you're into, they don't look the same either. Hello.
Exactly.
Yeah. But it's okay. To me, it's fantastic, actually.
Yeah.
I find it really exciting, to be in sort of a silver gold mode is how I experience it.
Yes, exactly. And the thing about it is that when we find women that have energy and vibrancy, and I'm talking about as friends, and certainly both genders, and I have friends of both genders, but my women friends that are silver and gold, they have energy and determination and can really move mountains because they aren't lacking in self-confidence.
And that's a big thing, really, at any age. It's not even just for when you're older. And I love that you brought up yoga, because I think yoga is one of the best exercises. If someone has not used to exercising and they're already midlife, I wouldn't jump into, a hot yoga class, but you might want to experiment with a chair yoga class. Take it slow, take it easy, but it's one of the best exercises for flexibility and for really elevating your mood.
I wouldn't miss it. I have a daily yoga practice. I drive downtown to a studio at 5:30 every morning, Monday through Friday. And it's funny because probably 2/3 of the class are my contemporaries. Yeah.
And that's early in the morning. And you don't have to do something that challenging. Every single cable TV company across the country usually has some pretty decent yoga shows on. And if they are on, like by my house, they're on 6 a.m., but I like to do it at 11. So I just tape it on the VCR, and I'll do it right at home on the days when I don't have time to make a class. So it can be extremely flexible. So we're going to take a little break right here, Sheree, and I'd like to remind you listeners that you are listening to Herbally Yours on the Voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. Listen live online at nccradio.org or on iHeartRadio. For more information about today's guest or topic, you can email us at whpc@ncc.edu. Stay tuned. Herbally Yours will be right back.
90.3 WHPC reminds you that any time is a great time to get a memory screening. Memory screenings are a quick, easy, non-invasive way to give your brain a checkup and an important part of overall health and wellness. The Alzheimer's Foundation of America's National Memory Screening Program can help you find a screening site near you. Plus, the Alzheimer's Foundation of America's toll-free helpline, staffed by licensed social workers, can provide support services for individuals living with Alzheimer's disease and their caregivers. If you or someone you know needs help caring for a loved one with Alzheimer's disease, or to find out about the memory screening program, please call 866-232-8484 or visit www.alzfdn.org. This message brought to you by the Alzheimer's Foundation of America and the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
And welcome back once again to more right here on The Natural Nurse and also right here on Herbally Yours on WHPC. We're so happy to have you with us. And today our guest is Sheree Clark, Midlife Courage Coach. And you can find her at whattheforkareyouvaitingfor.com. And I'd like to remind you that she is having a wonderful webinar. Well, it's kind of like a little listen-in webinar called Magnificent Midlife Women, in which she's interviewing many guests, including myself. And you can go to naturalnurse.com on calendar if you'd like to find out more about that. But let's go back to some really great topics. Like, who's to determine, Sheree, when it's like too late to change? Is it at 50, 60, 70? You know, some people, I think it's when they're 15.
You know, it's interesting because we all have that moment in time, I think, and I can say I even had it myself when I left the advertising business, and I thought to myself, I'm 53 years old. Is it too late to start over, to do something different, to say I'm not happy on the path that I'm on anymore? I loved it until I didn't. And ultimately, I am so grateful. That was 10 years ago. I'm so grateful that I realized that it's never too late, as long as you've got another breath in your lungs, to do something to change the situation that you're in if you're finding yourself not feeling authentic or connected or comfortable in what you're doing. And it's the thing about it is that we start either buying into what society has handed us. Oh, you're too old to go back to school or to make that change, or to our inner circle. You know, I will confess, I had some of my friends say to me, hey, is it that bad? I mean, what if you just like hung on and just retired? You're going to retire in what, maybe 7 years? Just what if you just hung on until you're 60 and just stuck it out? You make a lot of money. And every time I heard something like that, it pushed me farther into resolve that I was going to change it, because I thought, oh my gosh, that sounds terribly stuck. So my vote, and I'd like to hear your take on it as well, Ellen, my vote is it's never too late. And the minute you start telling yourself that you think that it is a time that you need to sit down and have a serious talking to with yourself.
Right. And like I said, I think it might have more to do with personality types than age. There are certainly people throughout their life who are, more stuck. And sometimes it's who you are, that you're not someone that finds change easy. It has to do with a lot of things, including some people will say your astrological sign, like I'm an Aries, and just overall anyone who knows astrology, and I don't know it deeply, but even on a surface level, Aries are really, often ready to jump into new things. While somebody who's more of a grounded kind of sign, like a Virgo, they're going to have to evaluate the situation for a much longer time. So some of it is just who we are.
Absolutely. And the thing about it is that we start thinking ahead. I have a client I was talking with the other day, and she's thinking about making a pretty dramatic change in where she lives. And she started to spiral a little bit out of control. And I said, take it, let's do one step. Just pick up the phone and talk to your advisor, your financial advisor, and let's figure out what would be a good budget to shoot for in terms of a new living situation. Don't start packing in your head. Don't start having to declutter the closets and where are you going to put this, and what if you couldn't find a place with 2 parking spots because you have 2 cars. Don't think about that. Take one step, one little baby step toward what you're thinking is a possibility, and evaluate that, because that's really how change happens.
So is that what you would consider sort of universal advice to all women as they hit midlife?
To take little steps and small evaluations? I think so. And, I think that there are times when we have decisions that we make where it's the last brick on the load, and sometimes that happens in a relationship. I've seen it happen in marriages. It happened in a relationship that I was in, where you endure a certain amount of indignities, and then finally there's one that is just too much. It's the final brick. It's the last straw. It's the thing that makes you say, "That's it. I can't turn the other cheek." Those are change things that we need to pay attention to. But the other changes, the ones that we make willingly or with forethought, for example, changing a living environment, downsizing because the house that you're in or the situation that you're in is no longer serving you because it's just you, or things of that nature, going to part-time from a full-time employment situation. Taking little steps along that way can make it seem less daunting.
Now, as a coach, how does somebody find you and decide that they want to work with you?
There are a couple of different ways, and it's not just even me in particular. I think I would give some general advice to someone who's thinking about coaching or that doesn't even really understand what it is. I believe that we get along best in this world with assistance, that as much as many of us, me included, can be a little bit of a lone wolf or a lone ranger. I'm certainly capable of doing a lot of things on my own and for myself, but I find that having another perspective, a compatriot, someone to walk the path with me is extremely beneficial. And while for some people at certain points in their lives, therapy is an important thing, or a spiritual advisor, or something along those lines would be good. A coach, many times one of the analogies that I make is a counselor or psychiatrist or that type of a helping professional looks in the rearview mirror and says, how did we get to this point? What happened in your life that you need to reconcile? What do we need to make peace with, and so forth? A coach is a little bit more likely to be looking out the windshield and saying, this is where you're at. I don't know how we got here, but this is where we're at. Where are we going from this point forward? And that's a little bit of a simplification, but it might help listeners to get a sense of what the differences are. And I think when you're looking for a coach in whatever area, and I will tell you, I have 3 coaches in my life right now, one in business, one in personal, and one having to do with physical. Whenever I'm doing some kind of a challenge or some kind of a physical, maybe it's endurance training or whatever I'll have a coach on a part-time, temporary basis just to help me achieve a goal. And I think when you're looking for a coach, the most important thing is finding someone that you have some kind of a resonance with, that when you listen to the person...
Sheree, you have to speak up because we're losing your sound signal.
Okay. That when you are evaluating who you'd like as a coach, you need to determine whether or not you are compatible with that person, whether when they speak you resonate with what they say, that your energy is similar and matched. And that's you can do, especially in this day and age, online, by looking and researching and learning more about the person that you're considering doing coaching with. And then it's essential to have a conversation with them. And most coaches will have a low-cost or no-cost conversation with someone who's looking to find a match.
So that's very good advice, and I want to remind you are listening to Herbally Yours on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse, and my guest today is the the Midlife Courage Coach. I love that name, Sheree Clark. And you can find her at whattheforkareyouvaitingfor.com. And she's been telling us how you have secrets for a happier, healthier life. Tell us about your mini course about 3 secrets for a happier, healthier life.
I love it. Thank you. So I have some life hacks, like many do, and some things that I think are important. And in the first video, I will share a secret, a little trick that I have for helping people get unstuck. And so I think that we all get stuck at some point or another where we're feeling a little bit like either you know something needs to change and you're not really sure where to start, or you know something needs to change, but you're not sure what it is. It's just a feeling of kind of discontent. So that's the first video. The second video is another life hack that has to do with quality of life and some things that you can do that would be beneficial in enhancing your quality of life. And then the third one is some advice that I give about resources or things that I do when I need something a little bit more than what I've got going on, and I don't know where to turn. So I'm being mysterious, I'm being vague, and that's on purpose because I really want people to take a look at that and embrace it and view it as truly a gift.
Well, that's great information that you're sharing. Now, tell us about your focus on nutrition, because that's certainly something that we talk a lot about here on Herbally Yours.
Absolutely. So I believe that that our nutrition decisions are made oftentimes, and I've alluded to this earlier in our conversation, not just by knowledge that we know that we need certain vitamins, minerals, nutrients, and so forth, but sometimes by emotional needs. And I know when I was still having my menstrual cycle, there would be certain times during the month that I would crave certain things. And I recognize that some of that might be physiological, but I also think that some of it is psychological, that there were some emotional needs that I had as a result of that. I also find that nutritionally, there are memory triggers. And an example might be, it's really difficult for me to go to a movie theater and not want to eat popcorn. And so even if I'm thinking to myself, well, I don't need the sodium, and that's not real butter, that's palm oil, and that might be genetically modified corn. I know all these things intellectually, and it's difficult for me still to walk into the theater and say, oh, I'm not going to have any popcorn. So what I do personally in that situation is I found a remedy for that, and I make some of my own snacks. I make a cauliflower, I call it popcorn, and I put nutritional yeast on it. It's got a cheesy flavor, and I'll add a little garlic and some salt, little drizzle of olive oil, and I shake it up, and I put it in a Ziploc bag and slip that into my purse. And when I'm sitting in the movie theater, I can be munching on that, and it's like I'm eating popcorn. The consistency is very similar. It's something you eat with your hands. You get a little messy, which makes it part of the fun of the movie theater popcorn. And so that's how I address the nutrition aspect. It's less from a clinical perspective and more from a practical perspective. What is it that you need? Why, or feeling that you're needing or craving? And what can we do about it that's even one step better?
Well, that's great advice. And I want to thank you so much for being our guest today. And thank you for tuning into Herbally Yours, which is produced in the studios of 90.3 WHPC at Nassau Community College, Garden City, New York. For more information, email us at whpc@ncc.edu. This is your host, Ellen Kamai at naturalnurse.com, inviting you to tune in next week for another edition of Herbally Yours. And until then, stay healthy.